The iron gates of Ravenshollow rose out of the dusk before me like the bars of a cell drawn against the slow red dying of a January sky. And I remember thinking, even before the carriage stopped, that no one had oiled the hinges in a long time. The driver of the post-chaise from Exeter had not spoken to me in 3 hours. He set my small leather trunk down upon the gravel in front of the lodge, touched the brim of his hat without looking at me, and turned the horses round on the spot. I watched the carriage rattle off down the cliff lane until it was only a dark blot against the gathering dark. Then I turned, and I climbed the 4 shallow stone steps of the lodge, and I lifted the heavy iron ring of the lodge bell, and I waited. I had on a faded gray wool traveling cape that had been my mother's, and under it a plain cream muslin morning dress that had been my mother's also. My mother had been 4 months in the churchyard. My father, 2 years before her, in the same plot. I was 22 years old. I had nothing in the world but the trunk at my feet, a sealed letter of reference from the vicar of Ottery St. Mary, and a position as upper housemaid at £14 a year in a house that, the village inn at Sidmouth had assured me, was haunted by something worse than a ghost. I had asked the innkeeper at Sidmouth what he meant. "Worse than a ghost, miss," he had said. "A ghost will leave a house in time." And what is at Ravenshollow that will not leave? "A man, miss. They keep a man in the east wing. He has not spoken since November the year before last. They put 6 girls in your place already and sent each of them home. I would not be the 7th. I am the 7th, sir." "Then God keep you, miss." The lodge gate was opened by a thin, gray-faced man in a black greatcoat who did not give his name. He pointed up the long drive without speaking. I shouldered my trunk, and I walked. The drive curved for a 1/4 of a mile beneath dark Devon oaks, bent landward by the constant wind off the channel, and then the house came clear, and I stopped on the gravel and I looked at it for a long minute before I went on. Ravenshollow was not so very large as the great houses of the great families. It was not Chatsworth nor Blenheim. It was perhaps 3 stories of grey-dressed stone, ivy thick on the south face, 2 wings flung east and west, a portico of weathered Portland over the front door. What made me stop was not the size of it. It was the windows. Of all the windows in that whole long facade, only 6 were lit. 5 of them were on the western side. The east wing was wholly dark, every window shuttered behind heavy boards, and the boards looked to have been there a long time. The housekeeper met me on the front steps under the portico. She held a single brass lantern in her right hand, and the small flame of it lit her up from below in a kindly, weary way. She was perhaps 60 years old. She wore a charcoal gray wool day dress with a starched white apron, and a white linen cap over silver hair, and a great iron ring of keys hung at her waist that clinked softly when she moved. Her eyes, when they found mine, were hazel, and they were kind. "You will be the new girl," she said. "Not a question. Come in, my dear, you must be perished. I am Mrs. Penruddock. I keep this house. I will keep you also, if you will let me." "Thank you, ma'am," I said. "I am very grateful for the place." "You have come a long way today." "From Ottery St. Mary, ma'am, by the post-chaise." "And not eaten since Exeter, I should think." "I had a piece of bread at the Sidmouth turnpike, ma'am. I am not hungry." "You are hungry, child. I have done this work 38 years, and I know hungry when I see it. We shall mend that. What is your given name?" I told her. "That is a good plain name," she said. "It will do well in this house. There are no ornamental names at Ravenshollow any more. You will not thank me in a week," said Mrs. Penruddock then, very quietly, and turned and led me inside. The entrance hall of Ravenshollow was a long, dark, wood-paneled room with a great curved staircase rising at the far end and a black-and-white marble floor that had been polished to a soft shine. There was a fire on the hearth at the eastern wall, but the eastern wall ended in a closed pair of double doors, oak banded with iron, and the firelight fell on those doors and did not pass them. I looked at the doors and I looked away, because I had been taught not to stare at what was not mine. "Sit down a moment," said Mrs. Penruddock, and she set the lantern on a console table and she stood in front of me with her hands folded at her apron. "Before I take you up to your room, I will tell you the rules of this house. There are not many. There is one. The east wing is closed. You will not enter the east wing. You will not knock at those doors. You will not speak through them. You will not stand outside them for the purpose of listening. If you are sent up the east stair on any errand, you will leave the tray on the upper hall console table outside the doors and you will turn round and you will come back down. Do you understand me, child?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "6 girls before you have not understood me. 6 girls before you have been put back into the post-chaise at the lodge gates with their trunks, and a quarter's wages and a letter saying they were not suited. I do not enjoy writing those letters. Do not make me write a 7th. "No, ma'am," I said. She studied me a moment. Her face softened. "You are a quiet thing." "I have been told so, ma'am." "His Grace's brother thought you would be. He approved your hiring himself. That is why you are here. The advertisement was sent up out of London by his lawyer, not by us. Mind what I have told you, and you may stay a long while at Ravenshollow." "His Grace," I said, careful. "Is he living, ma'am?" Mrs. Penruddock's mouth tightened. "He is living." "In the East Wing, ma'am?" "He has been in the East Wing 14 months. He had a fall from his horse the November before last at the hounds' Christmas hunt. The doctors say he will not walk again. He has not spoken a word to any soul in this house since the night they carried him in off the moor on a hurdle. Do you understand me now?" "I think I do, ma'am. Do you, child?" "I wonder." The other 6 thought they did. They were wrong. The East Wing is not a story you may tell yourself about. It is a door you do not open. Will you remember that for me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Say it again, please." "I will not open the door, ma'am." "Good. Good," she said. "Then come up. Your room is on the south landing. The east stair is the other way. You will not go down it after dark for any reason whatever. Are you hungry, child?" I told her I was not, which was a lie, and she saw it was a lie, and she said nothing about it. But when I came into the small whitewashed servants' room at the south corner, there was a tray on the deal table with a slice of cold beef, and a slice of dark bread, and a covered bowl of broth still steaming, and a small pewter cup of small beer beside it. And I ate it sitting on the edge of the iron bedstead in my traveling cape with my hands shaking, and I cried for the first time in a fortnight. And after I had cried, I made myself stop, because tears are an indulgence and a housemaid earning £14 a year cannot afford them. I worked 2 days at Ravenshollow without seeing a single sealed door, and I did not see the Duke at all. And on the morning of the 3rd day, Mrs. Penruddock came into the still room where I was sorting linen, and she stood a moment in the doorway with the tray in her hands, and she did not speak at once. "I would send Annie," she said at last, "but Annie is in the village with the laundress." "Ma'am?" "The east wing tray, child. It must go up at 10:30. Mr. Tremaine is in Sidmouth at the apothecary. There is no one else above stairs but you. Will you carry it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Set the tray on the upper hall console table. Knock once. Walk away. Mr. Tremaine will fetch it in when he returns. Do you understand me, child?" "Yes, ma'am." "Say it back to me, please." "Set it down. Knock once. Walk away." "Good. And child?" "Ma'am?" "Do not stand at the table after you have set it down. Do not listen at the door. Do not look at the keyhole. Will you do that for me?" "Yes, ma'am." I took the tray up the curving stair. I came along the upper hallway, and I came to the console table outside the east wing doors, and I set the tray down upon it. The doors were exactly as I had thought them. Heavy oak, banded with iron, a great brass keyhole at the height of my breastbone, the lock cold and dull in the candlelight from the wall sconce. I knocked once with my knuckle, lightly, as I had been told. There was no answer. There was, in fact, no sound at all. I stood there a moment, listening for the breath of a man on the other side of the wood, and I heard nothing. Not a chair shifting, not a fire crackling, not a clock ticking. Nothing. A great house. And behind those doors, nothing. As if a man were not there. As if a man had been buried alive behind those doors 14 months. I had been ordered to walk away. I lifted the tray off the console table. I set it down again upon the table. I lifted the latch of the east wing doors because they were not locked, only closed, and I walked through. That was the moment. That was the hour and the minute of my life that I went past the place I had been told not to go. I have thought about it 1,000 times in the years since. I have asked myself why. I am not a defiant woman. I was not a defiant girl. I had been an obedient daughter and I was learning to be an obedient servant. But I had stood there at the console table in the upper hall of a house on a cliff above a winter sea, and I had heard nothing through those doors, and I had thought, very clearly, he is a man, and he is alive, and someone has put him behind a wall, and not one of his servants has crossed it in 14 months, and I will not be the 7th that did not. The east wing corridor was unlit. I went down it with the tray steady in both my hands, the candle from the upper hall thrown long behind me, and the corridor smelled of cold ash and beeswax and the faint salt damp of a sea room shut up too long. There was one door at the end of the corridor that showed the faintest line of yellow light beneath it. I went to that door. I did not knock. I could not have borne to be answered or to be refused at that hour. I lifted the latch. I went in. The chamber was very large and very still. The marble fireplace had been laid with wood and kindling but had not been lit. The tall arched windows looked out over the cliff to the channel, and the night sea was a flat blue-black under a wide pale moon, and the windows were uncurtained. There was one candle burning on a small mahogany side table in a brass candelabrum of 3 arms, but only the center arm was lit. By the side table stood a polished mahogany wheeled invalid's chair with brass handles, and in that chair sat a man. I had not known what he would look like. I had imagined, I think, an older man, gaunt, mad in the eyes, raving. He was none of those things. He was a man perhaps 32 years of age, and he had been handsome before whatever had happened to him, and he was handsome still in the way that a fine cut of marble is handsome after it has been left out a winter in the rain. He had shoulder-length wavy dark brown hair, grown long and loose past the collar of a white linen shirt. He had a sharp aquiline nose. His jaw was Roman and fine, and covered in the soft growth of an unbarbered beard. He wore a dark indigo Regency dressing gown of heavy silk over the linen shirt, and a thin gray wool blanket was folded across the dead weight of his legs. There was a thin, pale scar along his left temple. His eyes, when they came up to mine, were hooded and gray, and so empty I almost flinched. And then I did not flinch, because to flinch from a man at that hour of his life seemed to me a worse thing than any rule I had broken to come into his room. I set the tray down on the side table next to the cold chessboard. The chessboard had a single white knight tipped over on its side, as if someone had set up a game 14 months ago and then never come back to it. I did not pick the knight up. I had not earned the right to pick the knight up. I said aloud in the quiet voice I had used at my mother's bedside, "Your Grace, you have not eaten today, and I cannot in conscience leave a man cold and hungry in his own house." He did not move. He did not speak. He looked at me. The look went on a long second, a second that felt long enough for a small life. I said. I am going to light your fire, Your Grace. You may dismiss me from this house in the morning if you wish. But I will not leave you in the cold tonight. I turned my back on him. I knelt at the marble hearth. I struck the flint to the laid wood. The kindling caught. The fire took. I rose and I dusted my hands on my apron, and I crossed back to the side table, and I lifted the lid off the bowl of broth, and I picked up the spoon. He was still looking at me. I am going to feed you, Your Grace, if you will permit it. And if you will not, I shall set the spoon down and read to you instead until the broth is cold. And then I shall come back tomorrow night, and the night after that, and the night after that. You may write the dismissal letter at your convenience. He did not answer. He did not nod. But after a long moment, while I sat in the small upholstered chair beside his and held out the spoon, he opened his mouth. And he ate. He ate 4 spoons of broth and 2 small bites of dark bread. Another, Your Grace. He turned his head slightly away. I read this for what it was. Enough then. We shall not press it tonight. I set the spoon down. I picked up the small calf-bound volume that was lying on the side table. I saw afterwards it had been set there 14 months ago by his own hand and had not been moved since. It was Cowper's poems. I had read Cowper at my father's knee. I opened it at random and I read aloud, in the steady reading voice my father had taught me, the lines about the cottage and the clock and the kettle on the hearth, the homely only lines that have comforted 10,000 quiet English readers for 40 years. I read for perhaps a quarter of an hour. The fire grew, the room warmed. The man in the chair did not move. And then, as I came to the end of a stanza, I saw it. His right hand was lying on the arm of the wheeled chair. The fingers were long and pale and quite still. As I read, the index finger of that hand lifted, very slightly, perhaps an inch off the polished mahogany of the chair arm. It hung there a moment. Then it settled back. It was nothing. It was the smallest gesture a man can make and still be said to have moved. But I knew, even at 22 years old, what it was. It was an acknowledgement. He had heard me. He had chosen to let me know he had heard me. And he had chosen to let no one but me see it, because there was no one but me in the room. I closed the book. I set it on the side table. I rose. I curtsied very slightly, the way one does to a person whom one has just met and is determined not to insult. And I said, "Good night, Your Grace. I shall come back tomorrow." I took the empty bowl and the spoon and the tray. I left the candle burning. I left the fire. I closed the door very softly behind me, and I walked back down the dark corridor of the east wing in a kind of silent shaking that was not fear and was not pride, and was something else I did not at 22 years old have a word for. If this story is finding you tonight, take a moment to press the like button below. It helps these candlelit stories find the readers who need them. Mrs. Penruddock was waiting for me at the foot of the great stair. She had a candle in her hand. She did not speak. I came down the last 3 steps and I stopped in front of her, and I waited to be sent away. "Did you take the tray to the table, child?" "Ma'am, I took it past the table." She closed her eyes a moment. When she opened them, they were wet. "Tell me he did not curse you." "He did not speak, ma'am." "He never does." "He ate, ma'am." "He what?" "He ate. 4 spoons of broth. 2 bites of bread." She set her free hand against the paneled wall as if she needed it to stand. 4 spoons. "Yes, ma'am. 4 spoons. Mr. Tremaine has been bringing the trays down untouched for 14 months. Do you know what you have done?" "I broke the rule, ma'am. I shall pack my trunk." "You shall pack nothing of the sort," said Mrs. Penruddock. She drew herself up. She wiped her eye on the edge of her apron. "You shall go to bed. And tomorrow night you shall take up the tray again, and you shall go past the table again, And you shall tell no living soul in this house what has passed in that room. Do you hear me, child? Yes, ma'am. Not one soul. Not the undermaids. Not the cook. Not above all, the brother. Ma'am, the brother? Mr. Nathaniel St. Aubyn, His Grace's elder half-brother. He comes down from London the third week of every month with his lawyer and his 3 medical men. He sits 1 hour with His Grace. He asks His Grace 12 questions. His Grace does not answer any of them. Mr. Nathaniel writes the silence down in a leather portfolio and takes it back to London with him. And he means, child, to go before the Lord Chancellor when the portfolio is thick enough. A writ will come down out of London on a sealed packet. We shall lose him. He is not locked in that room because he is mad. He is locked in that room because if he steps out of it, his brother will have him locked somewhere far worse. I understand, ma'am. Do you? Truly? Truly? Go to bed, child, and come back tomorrow, and bring a comb. I did not understand the comb that night. I understood it the next day when I asked Mrs. Penruddock at breakfast, "Ma'am, why a comb? Has Mr. Tremaine shaved him this fortnight?" "I have not asked, ma'am." "Has Mr. Tremaine combed his hair?" "I do not know, ma'am." Mr. Tremaine has not been permitted to touch his head in 10 weeks. The fall took the right side of it. The doctor stitched the temple. His Grace has not borne to have a hand near the scar since. He shaves himself when he can manage it. He has not combed his hair at all. Take a comb, child. Take my own tortoise shell. It was your mother's kind, I should think. It was. Then take a comb you know already, child. He will know whether your hand is sure. I went up at the same hour with a fresh tray, and found him in the same chair, and saw, in the better light of a morning fire, that his shoulder-length dark brown hair had not been touched by a comb in many weeks, and was tangled at the nape and at the temple where he leaned against the chair back. I had a small tortoise-shell comb of my mother's in my apron pocket. I set the tray on the side table. I lit the fire. I read him the morning newspaper from Exeter, 3 days old, the parts he might care for, the news of horses and the news of Parliament. He listened. He did not move. He did not speak. When I had finished the newspaper, I set it aside. I drew the small comb from my apron pocket. I came round behind his chair. "Your Grace." He did not move. "Mr. Tremaine tells Mrs. Penruddock you have not let him near your hair for 10 weeks. I am going to comb your hair now. If you will not have me do it, you have only to lift the finger you lifted last night, and I shall set the comb down and not touch you. But I think you will let me do it." He did not lift the finger. "I will be very gentle. I will not touch the scar. I have a comb of my mother's, and I have used it on her hair every night of the last winter of her life. I know the work." He did not lift the finger. "Your Grace, will you say nothing if I begin?" He said nothing. "Then I shall begin." I combed his hair. It took me 20 minutes, very gently, with my left hand cradling the heavy weight of it back from his temple, while my right hand worked through the tangles a strand at a time. He did not speak. He did not move. But when I came round in front of him at the end of it to make sure I had not missed any bit, his hooded gray eyes, which had been so empty the first night, had something in them. Not warmth. Not yet. Something more difficult than warmth. Something like the raw beginning of being seen. "There, Your Grace. It is done." He did not answer. "I shall come back tomorrow night." The right index finger lifted, once, slow, off the chair arm. That was the first turning. After that, everything was small and slow. I went to him every night after the household was abed. I took up a tray from Mrs. Penruddock, who had begun to put on it small things she said she had on hand: a wedge of good Wensleydale, a winter pear, a thimble of the late Duchess's elderflower wine that had been kept in the still room since 1810. He ate. Not much, but he ate. I read to him from Cowper, then from Cowper's letters, then from Boswell's Johnson, then from a small green volume of Wordsworth that Mrs. Penruddock told me had been a gift to him from his father in his Oxford days. I learned his hands. The right one would lift a finger when he agreed. The left one, on the second week, lifted two when he wished me to turn a page back and read a line again. I learned, by the third week, that he liked the Wordsworth lines about the daffodils, not because of the daffodils, but because of the way the host of them was held in the mind forever after. I learned this because when I read those lines, his eyes closed for a long second, and when they opened, they were wet. In the second week, I asked Mrs. Penruddock about the chessboard. Ma'am, the brass-bound board on the side table. Was he a player? He was. He is. How good? His Grace was the third best chess player in Devonshire when he was 20. He played his father every Sunday after church. He played his cousin Lord Heanton 3 nights a week before the fall. He has not touched the board in 14 months. Will he know if I move a piece? Child, he will know the instant he looks at it. Even the knight that has been on its side. Especially the knight that has been on its side. He set it there himself, the night they brought him down out of the chamber to the bed. He was lying on the litter. He reached out his right hand. He tipped the knight. He has not spoken since. Why the knight, ma'am? His mount that day was called Knight. Knight broke his neck at the third hedge. The Duke was thrown clear and broke his back on the gatepost. He tipped the piece for the horse, child. Do you see now? Yes, ma'am. I see. I went up that night and I did not move a piece. I sat down in front of the board and I picked up the white knight that had been lying on its side on its black square for 14 months, and I set it upright. I did not advance it. I only set it on its feet. Then I looked at him. Your Grace, I have set him on his feet. I have not moved him otherwise. Will you play with me tonight? His right index finger lifted from the chair arm. Then it lifted again. Twice. Twice for 2 squares forward, Your Grace? The finger lifted a third time. 3 times for 1 to the side as well. The finger lifted again. Then knight to the king's bishop 3. Yes, Your Grace? The blink came, slow. I shall play Philidor's defense, Your Grace, if you will let me. My father taught me Philidor when I was 8. The blink came again. We played 16 moves that night, the most I have ever played in a single sitting, my finger waiting at each piece for his answer. He won in 22 moves. He had not said a word. I curtsied to him at the end of it, with the seriousness of a defeated opponent. I shall study Philidor before I come up tomorrow, Your Grace. I shall do better. The blink came again. Good night, Your Grace. His eyes did the slow blink one more time. I left him. In the third week, the wind shifted to the south for 2 days running, and the air off the channel came up the cliff smelling green, the way it does at the very turning of February, when the spring is still 6 weeks off but the sea has begun to know about it. I went up that night. He was sitting in his usual place. The window had been cracked open an inch by Mr. Tremaine, who had developed by that time a very tactful pretense of not knowing I came up the east stair after dark. I sat down across from him. Your Grace. He looked at me. I should like to take you out into the cliff garden tomorrow at noon. He did not answer. He did not lift a finger. He looked at me. The doctor says it is not safe. Mrs. Penruddock has shown me the letter. He says the sea air will take you off in a fortnight. He did not move. He has also said that the sea air would take you off if Mr. Tremaine so much as cracked a window. And you have had Mr. Tremaine cracking your window an inch every night since I have been in this house. And you are still here. The smallest blink. I think the doctor is a fool, Your Grace. The blink came again, and the right corner of his mouth moved very faintly. I think you have been kept indoors 14 months because it was easier for the household to keep you indoors than to push the chair across a cliff lawn with the wind in it. I should like to push the chair across the cliff lawn tomorrow at noon. I should like to do it whether the doctor is consulted or not. With your leave. His right index finger lifted from the chair arm. Once. That is yes, your grace. The finger lifted again. I went down that night and I found Mrs. Penruddock in the still room. Ma'am. Yes, child. I shall be wheeling his grace into the garden tomorrow at noon. She looked up from her ledger. You shall what? I shall be wheeling his grace into the garden tomorrow at noon. The doctor be hanged, ma'am. He has had his window cracked an inch every night for 11 weeks and he is still here. He has not had the cliff air on his face in 14 months. I should like to give it to him. You will catch your death, child. I shall not, ma'am. He shall not. The wind is from the south. And if the doctor comes up from Sidmouth and finds out, let him find out. Let him write the letter to the brother. The brother is coming anyway. She pressed her apron to her face for nearly a minute. Then she looked up. I shall have the gardeners clear the gravel walk from the south door to the cliff seat at first light. Thank you, ma'am. And, child, ma'am, you shall wear his late mother's wine-red wool walking shawl. It is in the press in the south corridor. She would have wished it. Are you certain, ma'am? I am certain. Wear it tomorrow. Wear it always when you are with him out of doors. She would have wished it. I wheeled him out the south door at noon the next day. Are you warm enough, your grace? The blink. The wind is steady. I shall stop the chair if the gust is strong. The blink. There is a small ship out on the channel, your grace. I shall point it out at the seat. The blink. The cliff garden was as Mrs. Penruddock had made it. The gravel walk freshly swept, the high winter grass on either side blowing landward, the channel below us so blue and so vast that the eye could not take in the whole of it at once. I pushed the chair slowly. I did not speak after that. He looked. He looked at the grass, and he looked at the gulls, and he looked at the slate roofs of the village 2 miles along the coast, and he looked at the wide, pale February sky, and his hands rested on the arms of the wheeled chair, and his fingers, both hands, lifted very slightly off the wood, again and again, as if he were tasting the open air through them. We came to the cliff seat. I set the brake on the chair. I knelt down beside it on the grass with my arm along the chair arm so that my shoulder was near his shoulder. There was a small ship far out on the channel, a single sail, leaning south. I pointed at it. A merchantman, your grace, out of Plymouth, by the cut of the sail, bound for Lisbon perhaps, or Cadiz. There was a long second in which only the gulls cried, then a voice, very low and very rough, and almost a whisper beside me. The wind is from the south. I can hear the gulls. I did not move. I did not turn my head. I knew without being told that if I looked at him in that instant he would close. I kept my eyes on the small sail. Yes, your grace, the wind is from the south. They have been calling it for 3 days. You knew that. I asked Mrs. Penruddock at breakfast. Your grace, she always knows the wind. You did not say anything until I did. No, your grace, I would not. Why not, child? Because, your grace, you would have to find the words yourself. You will not borrow mine. He did not speak again that afternoon. But the words had been spoken, the first words, in 14 months, to me, beside the cliff, with the gulls crying overhead and a merchantman leaning for Lisbon and the wide blue channel breathing under us. I have heard a great many words spoken in my life. I have not heard any spoken better. I went down to Mrs. Penruddock that evening. I shut the still-room door behind me. Ma'am. Yes, child. He spoke today. What did you say? He spoke, on the cliff, beside the seat. He said the wind was from the south, and he could hear the gulls. He said, those were his exact words, ma'am. Aloud. Aloud, ma'am. Hoarse, quiet, but aloud. She sat down on a stool by the herb shelf and she put her face into her apron and she wept for a long quarter of an hour without making a sound. When she lifted her face, her eyes were red and very clear. Mr. Nathaniel arrives at the end of the 11th week. That is 6 weeks from today. 6 weeks. We have 6 weeks, child. 6 weeks for what, ma'am? 6 weeks to give him back to himself, before the brother takes him. What must I do? What you have been doing. Only more of it. Every night. The reading. The chess. The garden. The hair. The hand on the chair arm. All of it. I shall do it, ma'am. I know you shall. In the 4th week I found the notebook. Mrs. Penruddock came to me at breakfast. Child. Ma'am. His Grace's dressing room must be turned out today. Mr. Tremaine has been doing it himself 14 months. He has asked me this morning if you might do it instead. Mr. Tremaine asked, ma'am. Mr. Tremaine asked. He says it is a kindness His Grace will not refuse from your hand. Will you do it? Yes, ma'am. Be thorough, child. Be slow. There is more in that room than linen. I went through the press. I found the white linen, the silk waistcoats neatly laid in lavender, the dark indigo dressing gowns. In the bottom drawer of a small inlaid writing table, I found a slim calf-bound notebook tied with a blue silk ribbon, and on the flyleaf, in a strong slanting hand I had come to know from the bookplate in his cowper, the words, "A School for the Tenant Children of Ravens Hollow. First Plans, November the 1st, 1813. The riding accident had been on November the 5th, 1813. The fall had come 4 days after this notebook. I sat down on the floor of the dressing room with the notebook in my lap, and I read it through cover to cover. It was a working book. It was full of careful pencil sketches of a long single-story schoolhouse with a slate roof and a porch at the south end and windows on both long sides for the morning and afternoon light. There were lists of timber. There were calculations of cost in his own neat hand. There were notes, 3 columns at a time, for a curriculum that was generous and old-fashioned and very kind, reading from the King James and from Robinson Crusoe, a daily hour of arithmetic, a daily hour of singing, on Saturdays, a walk to the cliff seat to learn the names of the gulls and the names of the boats. In the margin of the cost page he had written, in a slant that was almost an apology to himself, "If we do not spend the money on the children, we shall spend it on the wallpaper, and the children will outlast the wallpaper." I sat on the floor of the dressing room a long time with that notebook in my lap. Then I went up to him that night with the notebook in my apron pocket. I sat down in my usual chair. I did not light the fire yet. I drew the notebook out of my pocket. I held it up so he could see it. He looked at it. His face did not change, but the long fingers of his right hand closed slowly in his lap, and his eyes lifted to mine, and a thing went between us in that silence that I do not know how to set down on a page, though I am trying. Your Grace, I found this in your dressing room. I have read it. It is a good plan. It is a kind plan. May I copy it into a fair hand? His right index finger lifted from the chair arm. Once. Slow. Will you tell me, Your Grace, where you should like the schoolhouse built? There is no map in the notebook. There was a very long pause. His eyes closed. His eyes opened. The hoarse, low voice that had told me about the gulls came again, careful. You have read this passage twice tonight. Your Grace? You have read this passage twice tonight, child. I think you know already. Will you say it for me, Your Grace? So I am sure. The East Wing Chamber, where I have been kept. Your Grace. Are you certain? I am certain. It is your bedroom, Your Grace. Your bedroom of 14 months. It is the room with the south light, child. It is the largest room above stairs. It will hold 20 desks. The chamber I have slept in is now to be moved 1 story up. Yes, Your Grace. Will you write that down in the notebook, child? In your own hand, so that it is fixed. I shall, Your Grace. I did not trust myself to say more. I bowed my head. Yes, Your Grace. I went home that night, by which I mean to my whitewashed servant's room in the south corner, and I sat at the deal table with the notebook open beside me, and a single tallow candle and a stack of cheap foolscap I had bought of the Sidmouth stationer, and I began to copy the plans into my fair hand. I copied for 3 hours. I copied every night for the next 5 weeks. I copied the elevations and the floor plans and the lists of timber and the columns of curriculum and the apology in the margin about the wallpaper. By the end of the 5th week, I had a fair copy of the whole book in a clean hand on good paper, tied with a length of dark green ribbon I had bought of the same stationer. I did not show him the fair copy. I was saving it for a thing I had not yet named to myself. The 5th week he spoke a second time. Only to me, only at night, only briefly. I had been reading him a sermon of Dawn's, because the wind was up, and the chamber was deep, and the cadences of the 17th century seemed to fit the night. I came to the line about no man being an island. I read it. I closed the book. The fire was low. The candles were low. He was very still in the chair, and I thought he had fallen asleep, which he sometimes did now, and I rose to bank the fire for the night. His voice came from behind me, hoarse, quiet, whole. Stay a little longer, if you will. I did not turn. I did not look at him. Yes, Your Grace. You were going to bank the fire. I was, Your Grace. I shall not. Read the passage again. The one about the bell. The bell that tolls. That bell. Yes. I sat back down. I read him the bell passage again. I read the 3 pages that follow it. When I closed the book at last. Thank you, child. Your Grace. Will you stay another quarter? I shall stay as long as you wish, Your Grace. That is a long answer to a short question. It is the only answer I have. He did not say more, but his right hand had moved across the chair arm in the quarter of an hour I had been reading, and the fingers were lying lightly over my own, where I had rested it on the side table edge. They had not been there when I sat down. He had moved his hand to mine. I did not move my hand. We sat that way perhaps 2 minutes. Good night, Your Grace. He did not answer, but the small pressure of his fingers over mine, just before I rose, was an answer of its own kind. I went down the dark corridor with my hand still warm where his had lain over it, and I understood, in a slow, clear, shocked way, that I was not going to be able to leave Ravenshollow. Not for any wage, not for any reason. I was going to have to be carried out of it. In the 6th week we played chess every night. He had taken to lifting the index finger of his left hand once for the file, and a different finger of his right for the rank, and we had developed a small notation between us that did not require him to speak. He was a careful player and a patient one, and he was teaching me, slowly, by the moves I lost on, what I had not seen. He won every game. He won them gently. On the 3rd night of the 6th week, after he had set my queen in a fork I had not seen coming, he spoke aloud, hoarse and dry. You did not look at the bishop. I did not lift my eyes from the board. No, Your Grace, I did not. You will, tomorrow. I shall. It is a good fault, child. A bishop on a long diagonal is a thing one learns to see only by losing to it. Then I have begun to learn it tonight. You have. Set the pieces again. Yes, Your Grace. His mouth, in the candlelight, did the very smallest thing. Not a smile, not yet, but the cousin of one. And we played on. In the 7th week he asked me, by raised finger and a long, careful look at the high mahogany clothes press in the corner, to bring out from the bottom drawer a small sandalwood box. This one, Your Grace. The blink, slow. On your lap. The blink. I set the box on his lap. He lifted the lid himself with both his hands, slow and not quite steady, and inside it lay a folded square of pale blue silk that had been a riding stock, his own, on the day of the fall. There was still a small dark stain on it where the temple cut had bled. "This is yours, your grace." His voice was very low. It was. From the day. From the day. Why have you kept it?" "To remember that I am not yet the man I was." "Your grace." "Put it back, child." "Yes, your grace." I put it back. Neither of us spoke for a long minute. But when I came to him the next night, he held out his right hand to me, palm up, and waited. "Your grace?" "Your hand, child." I gave him my hand. He kept it 5 quiet minutes in his own while I read aloud to him from the second book of the Aeneid, and the warmth of his palm was the steadiest thing in that house. In the 8th week we began the small, slow work of his legs. The Sidmouth doctor had said no good would come of moving them. Mr. Tremaine the valet, who had served the Duke since they were both boys at Eton and who had begun, after the brothers' last visit, to look at me with a kind of grave, respectful relief, took me aside in the still room one morning. "Miss," he said, a word. "Mr. Tremaine. You will not have heard, miss, that I served as valet to a hussar major after Talavera in 1909. No, sir. He took a French ball through the spine at the bridge over the Alberche. He was told by an army surgeon at Lisbon and by a London man at Harley Street that he would not walk again. They were both kind men. They were both wrong. He walked, sir. He walked, miss, at the end of 7 months. His wife moved his legs for him a quarter of an hour every morning and a quarter of an hour every evening. She did not believe the doctor. She is the reason he is alive today and a magistrate in Wiltshire." "Mr. Tremaine, are you suggesting—" "I am suggesting nothing, miss. I am telling you a thing I saw with my own eyes. I do not say it will work in this case. I say only that the doctor in the Major's case was wrong, and I would not be sorry to be of use." "Will his grace permit it?" "He will permit it, miss, if you ask him." "He will not permit it of me alone." "Then we shall begin tonight." "Tonight, miss." "Yes." We began that night. "Your grace." He looked at me. "Mr. Tremaine and I would like, with your leave, to work the long muscles of your calves and your thighs a quarter of an hour at a time, twice a day. He has seen it done before. I have not. He will instruct me." The blink. "You will tell me, your grace, if I press too hard." The blink. "You will tell me also, your grace, if you feel anything at all, even the slightest thing. Will you promise me that?" The blink. "Then we shall begin." Mr. Tremaine lifted the blanket aside, very respectful, and I knelt at the side of the wheeled chair, and we worked the long muscles of the Duke's calves and the small-waisted muscles of his thighs through the thin linen of his evening trousers a quarter of an hour at a time, and the Duke watched the ceiling and did not speak, and his right hand on the chair arm tightened and loosened in a small private rhythm, and on the 4th night of the 8th week, very late, he spoke, hoarse and quiet. I felt that. I lifted my hands at once. "What did you feel, your grace?" "The thumb you put on the inside of my left knee. I felt it. Truly, truly, child." Mr. Tremaine, he felt it. I heard him, miss. Mr. Tremaine went out of the chamber that night by the corridor door and shut the door behind him, and I heard him, from the other side of the oak, weep openly for nearly a minute. The only time in my life I have known a manservant of an English household weep aloud. In the 9th week the daffodils came in along the south wall of the cliff garden, and I cut a small armful of them every morning and brought them up to his chamber. He liked them in a small white china jug on the side table by the chessboard. He liked the smell of them. He liked the south wind that came in the cracked window with the smell of them. We had begun, by this time, to talk in short level sentences across the chessboard between moves, the way two people talk who have known each other a great while and do not need to fill the silence. What was your mother like, child? She was very small, Your Grace, smaller than I am, very quiet. She read to my father every night out of the Pilgrim's Progress while he stitched the bindings. He was a bookbinder. He was, Your Grace, in Smithfield, plain calf in Morocco. He bound a cowper for the Bishop of London once. He was proudest of that. What books did he bind for himself? A Walton's Angler, a Bunyan, a small Latin Horace my mother had given him when they were married, a cowper, like the bishop's, only plain. He could not afford the gilt. And what books are still in the world that you brought with you? Only the cowper, Your Grace. The Horace was sold for the doctor. You sold the Horace. Yes, Your Grace. I am sorry, child. It was right to sell it, Your Grace. He would not have wished my mother to die for a book. We were quiet a while over the board. Then, are you afraid of my brother? No, Your Grace. Why not? Because, Your Grace, fear of him would mean leaving you, and I will not leave you. He looked at me a long minute over the chessboard. The voice that had begun, by that 9th week, to be almost his own again was steady when he spoke. You should be a little afraid of him, child. Only a little, not enough to leave. Yes, Your Grace. Promise me that. I promise, Your Grace. In the 10th week he stood up. He did not tell me he was going to. I came up the east stair with the tray as usual at 10:30, and I lifted the latch of the chamber door, and I walked in, and the wheeled mahogany chair was empty, and I felt for one terrible second that the brother had come a week early and taken him in the night. Then I saw him. He was standing. He was standing at the tall arched window with his right hand braced on the sill, and his left on the carved post of the bed foot they had brought into the chamber, and his shoulders were trembling with the held weight of him, and his shoulder-length dark brown hair was lifted by the small draught coming in the cracked window, and he was looking out across the dark channel under a very thin spring moon, and he was on his own 2 legs. I set the tray down so quickly I nearly spilled the broth. I did not run to him. I knew not to run to him. I came across the chamber slowly. I came to his side. I did not put my hand on him. How long, Your Grace? A little more than a count of 40, child. I have been counting. Will you let me put my arm under your elbow? Not yet. How long do you mean to stand? 50. I had set 50 in my mind tonight. And after 50? After 50, child, you may put your arm under my elbow, and we shall sit down, and I shall be very pleased. Yes, Your Grace. Are you counting too? I am, Your Grace. What count? 43. 43. Good. I stood beside him at the window the rest of the count, which was 8 more, and at 51 his right hand began to shake on the sill, and I put my arm under his elbow and we lowered him back into the chair together. He sat in the chair very quiet a long minute. Tomorrow night, 60. Yes, Your Grace. And the night after, 70. And then we shall see. Yes, Your Grace. You are very steady, child. I am only steady because you are. That is not true, but I shall let you say it. We did not, that night, play chess. We did not, that night, read. He held my hand on the chair arm a long, quiet hour while the fire burned down, and we said almost nothing, and what we did not say was the larger part of it. Mr. Nathaniel St. Aubyn arrived in the 11th week on a Tuesday at noon, in a black London chaise with the family arms small on the door, and he brought with him 3 medical men in dark coats, and a thin, sallow lawyer in spectacles, and a leather portfolio that, Mrs. Penruddock had warned me, was at last thick enough. I had been kneeling in the cliff garden cutting the first of the early daffodils for the chamber, when Mrs. Penruddock came down the gravel walk at a pace I had not seen her use in 3 months. Child, ma'am, He is here. The brother. He is in the great hall. He has the writ. He has signed papers from the Lord Chancellor's office. He has a closed traveling carriage at the front door with 2 men of his own in it. He means to take his grace to a private establishment in Hammersmith this very afternoon. Where is his grace? They have brought him down. They have brought him down to the great hall in the wheeled chair. Mr. Tremaine is with him. Mr. Tremaine is white as a sheet. Come. Come now, child. Have they touched him? Not yet. They shall not. Come. I came. I did not stop to set down the daffodils. I came up the gravel walk with the cut flowers still in my left hand, and my apron hem dark with garden earth. Has Mr. Tremaine the deed of gift, ma'am? In his coat pocket. I gave it to him this morning. And the fair copy of the school plans. In your room, child. In the press, where you left it. Will you fetch it down to the hall? At once. Quickly, ma'am. Quickly, child. Yes. I came into the manor by the south door, and I walked through the long paneled corridor, and I came out into the great hall with my heart very high and very hard in my throat. The great hall of Ravenshollow at midday was a room of cold marble floor and tall arched windows full of pale March light, and it had a long oak refectory table down the center of it, and at the head of the table stood the brother. I had not seen him before. He was perhaps 38. He was lean and angular and 6 feet tall. He had neatly cut dark hair, hard pale gray eyes, and he wore a sharp black London tailcoat over a black silk waistcoat, a crisp white cravat at his throat, fawn breeches, polished black Hessian boots. The leather portfolio was in his right hand. Behind him stood the 3 medical men in dark coats, hats off, faces as professionally compassionate as a pew of church wardens. The lawyer was at the far end of the table with the writ already laid out flat and weighted with an inkstand. Mr. Tremaine the valet stood by the wheeled chair. In the wheeled chair, in his dark indigo dressing gown and white linen shirt and gray wool blanket, sat the Duke. He had been brought down from the east wing for the first time in 14 months, and his hooded gray eyes were the eyes of a man on a tumbrel. The brother turned as I came in. He looked me up and down with the cold, practical glance of a man pricing a horse for a sale. You will be the new girl. I am the new girl, sir. You may go, child. This is family business. It is, sir. That is why I am staying. Did you not hear me? I heard you, sir. Then go. No, sir. I did not go. I walked past him down the long table. I came to the chair. I set the daffodils down on the oak table beside it. I knelt on the marble. I looked up into the Duke's face. I said, very quiet, very steady, in the voice I had used the first night with the bowl of broth. Your Grace, they have come, Mrs. Penruddock told me. I have your fair copy of the school plans in the press in my room. I have the deed of gift drawn out by the Sidmouth attorney for your signature. Your hand is steady enough to sign it. We have only to refuse them. The brother said, Get up, girl. Now. I rose. I did not turn round. I kept my eyes on the Duke. I said, Your Grace, speak. The Duke's hooded gray eyes lifted. They went past me. They found the brother. They held the brother. The chamber was very quiet. Somewhere outside a single gull cried. Then the Duke spoke. The second time in 14 months. Aloud. Hoarse but clear. Audible the length of the great hall and back. Nathaniel, he said, I am not going with you. I am not now, nor have I ever been incompetent to manage my estate. I have been silent. That is a different thing. You will leave my house this hour. You will take your medical men with you. You will take your lawyer with you. You will not return to Ravenshollow without my written invitation. If you bring a writ against me into the Court of Chancery, I shall be in London the same week to answer it in my own person, and I shall bring with me the deed of gift of the east wing of this manor as a free school for the tenant children of this estate. and I shall bring with me the woman who has read aloud to me every night for 11 weeks while you were in London thickening your portfolio. And the Lord Chancellor will see, Nathaniel, who has been competent in this house, and who is not. It was a long speech. It was a speech of a kind a man could not make if he had not been preparing it inside himself, in silence, for a very long time. The brother went the color of new paper. The three medical men took a small, involuntary step backwards. The lawyer at the end of the table put down his pen. Mr. Nathaniel St. Aubyn was not a stupid man. He saw, in the second after the speech, that he had been outmaneuvered. Not by any cleverness he could fight in a chancery court, but by the simple fact that the brother he had come to bury was sitting upright in a wheeled chair in his own great hall, speaking in clear sentences in front of three witnesses. He drew himself up. He smiled a thin London smile that did not touch the pale gray eyes. I see we have had a remarkable improvement of late. I have been improving since November, Nathaniel. I have only been silent. For 14 months. For 14 months. That is a long silence, Edmund. It is. I am done with it now. I see that. I shall not trouble you further this afternoon, Edmund. I bid you and your housemaid good day. He turned. He turned too fast. His eyes had gone past me to the wheeled chair, and his shoulder was already coming round, and he was not quite himself, and his hand at the portfolio was not quite steady, and he made the smallest motion towards the chair as if to lay one hand on the chair arm in a parting parody of brotherly farewell. I did not let him. There was a tall brass three-arm candlestick on the oak table, the same shape as the candelabrum I had lit beside him every night for 11 weeks. I lifted it. I lifted it in my right hand. I stepped between the brother and the wheeled chair, and I held the candlestick lifted, and I stood there very still in my wine-red Regency morning dress, with the daffodils on the table behind me, and my eyes level on the brother's eyes. And I said, in a voice I did not know I had until that moment, "You will not touch him, sir. Not now. Not ever. You will leave this house." The brother looked at me. He looked at the candlestick. He looked longest at the Duke. Then he gave the small London bow that is given by a man who is lost. "Edmund," he said, "good afternoon." "Good afternoon, Nathaniel," said the Duke. The brother went. The medical men went. The lawyer rolled the writ up with hands that had begun to tremble slightly and went after them. The traveling carriage rolled out of the front court and down the cliff lane, and Mrs. Penruddock came in by the south door with both hands at her mouth, and I set the brass candlestick down on the oak table next to the daffodils, and my own hands began at last to shake, and the Duke said, very quietly, from the wheeled chair behind me, "Come here, child, come round." I came round. I knelt by the chair. He looked down at me. The hooded gray eyes were not empty anymore. They had not been empty in many weeks, but they were full now in a different way than I had seen them full. He lifted his right hand, the one whose finger had been the only voluntary movement his servants had seen in 14 months, and he laid it, the whole of it, against my cheek. His palm was warm. His palm shook a little. "You have stayed," he said. "Yes, Your Grace. You will not be a housemaid in this house any longer. No, Your Grace. You will be the mistress of the school we are going to build in the East Wing. Yes, Your Grace. And in time, if you will have me, and if my legs will bear my weight again, which I think with patience they may, you will be the mistress of the rest of it also. Your Grace, will you have me, child? Your Grace, I am the daughter of a London bookbinder. I am 22 years old. I have nothing in the world but a cowper and a gold cross. You have me, child, if you will have me. Are you certain? I have not been so certain of anything in 15 months. Then yes, I will have you. Say it again, child. Yes, I will have you. Once more, please. Yes. He closed his eyes. A single tear came down the side of his nose and lost itself in the soft beard at his jaw. He did not wipe it. He did not need to. We stayed that way a long minute, his hand against my cheek against his palm, the daffodils on the table, the brass candlestick where I had set it down, the great hall of Raven's Hollow open to the pale March light around us. If you have ever known what it is to be looked at without being looked away from, subscribe to the Duke's vow. We tell these stories because some silences only break when one woman refuses to leave the room. The spring came on slowly that year. The Duke's legs came back to him slower still, but they came. By the end of March, he could stand at the window of his chamber for the count of 50, with one hand on the sill and the other on the carved post of the bed. By the end of April, he could walk 3 paces from the wheeled chair to the chamber door, slowly, breathing hard with a polished blackthorn cane in his right hand. By the middle of May, he could walk the length of the long gallery without the cane at all, though he kept it for steadier days. The Devon doctor who had told us all that he would be off in a fortnight in the sea air came up from Sidmouth in early April and walked the length of the gallery at the Duke's elbow. "I am astonished, Your Grace." "Are you, doctor?" "Truly astonished. I was certain, that is, the prognosis was—" "Your prognosis, doctor." "Yes, Your Grace." "Was wrong. It was wrong, Your Grace. You will not, I trust, give the same prognosis to the next man who comes off a horse in this county." "I shall not, Your Grace." "Good. Mrs. Penruddock will see to your bill." He paid the bill without comment. The school was opened on the 3rd Saturday of May, 1815. The east wing of Ravenshollow had been open to the cliff air every fair day since the 1st of March. The chamber where I had first found him in the wheeled chair was scrubbed and whitewashed and floored with new pine boards, and the marble fireplace was new blackened, and along the inside wall I had ranged 20 small oak desks the carpenter from Beer had made to a sketch of the Duke's, each with a small slate and a small piece of chalk and a small linen cloth for the chalk. And on the master's desk at the window end I had laid a Bible and a copy of Robinson Crusoe and a copy of Cowper's poems, in honor of the books that had read us into being. The brass-bound chessboard, with the white knight back upright on its square, had been moved from the side table where it had stood untouched 14 months, to a low shelf where the children might learn the moves on rainy afternoons. We opened the doors at 10 in the morning. The Duke walked out of the great hall on his cane in a fitted gray coat and a white linen shirt and a green silk waistcoat his mother had given him on his 21st birthday, and he had not worn since the fall, and he stood in the May sunshine on the gravel walk with my hand in the crook of his arm. Mrs. Penruddock stood at the top of the steps, with both her hands in her apron and her eyes very wet. Mr. Tremaine stood beside her. The children of the tenant farms came up the cliff lane in their best clothes, holding their mothers' hands, 22 of them, between the ages of 6 and 12, and they stopped at the gravel walk and looked at the Duke. The Duke bowed to them. It was a slight bow, careful of the new strength of his back, but it was a bow such as one gentleman makes to another when the meeting is a meeting of equals. "Good morning, children." "Good morning, Your Grace," they said all at once, in the way country children have been taught. "My name is Edmund. Your school is open. Will you come in?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Then come." They came in. They sat at the desks. The young curate from Otterton, whom we had hired as the master, opened the Bible and read the parable of the talents in his good, clear country voice. The children listened. The Duke listened. I stood at the back wall in my wine-red Regency morning dress with my hands folded at my apron, and I looked across the room at his shoulder-length dark brown hair against the white window light, and I thought, very quietly to myself, of the empty chamber and the cold fire and the tipped white knight and the single finger lifted from the chair arm 14 weeks before. And I thought also of my mother, who would have been pleased, and of my father, who would have been proud, and of the 6 girls before me who had not gone past the upper hall console table. And I thanked God for whatever small flint of stubbornness in me had set the tray down, and lifted it, and set it down again, and walked through. After the curate had finished, the Duke turned to me at the back of the room. "Will you read them something, child?" "What would you have me read, your grace?" "The lines about the cottage and the kettle, from Cowper." "The same lines." "The same lines, child." "Why those lines, your grace?" "Because they were the first you read to me. They should be the first these children hear in this room." "Yes, your grace." "Read slowly. The little ones will not have heard verse before." "I shall, your grace." I read the lines. The children listened. The youngest of them, a little girl with red hair, mouthed the easier words after me. When I closed the book, the Duke nodded to me once, slowly, and his hooded gray eyes were as they had been the first night, except that they were not empty anymore, and would not be empty again. We were married in the little parish church at Branscombe on the 1st of June. Mrs. Penruddock walked me up the aisle. "Are you steady, child?" "I am steady, ma'am." "Your hand is shaking." "A little." "Take my arm. There. We shall walk slow." "Yes, ma'am." The Duke stood at the altar without his cane, though he had a hand on the chancel rail to steady him, and his hooded gray eyes when they came up to mine were not empty, and had not been empty in many weeks, and would not be empty again. "You came," he said, very quietly when I reached him. "I came, your grace." "You will not call me that today, child. What shall I call you today?" "Edmund." "Plainly, as you have done in the chamber these last 2 months when no one heard." "Edmund?" "Yes." We exchanged the old plain English words. We came out of the church into the June light, and the children of the school stood in 2 lines on the path with sprigs of wild thyme in their small fists, and they threw the thyme over us, and the air smelled of the cliff and the sea and the open garden of Ravenshollow that was no longer sealed, and the gulls cried overhead the way they had cried over us the first afternoon I had wheeled him out of the south door and pointed at the merchantman bound for Lisbon. I have set down here only what happened. I have not set down what the rest of our life together has been, because the rest of our life is not yet finished, and what is not yet finished is not yet a story. I have only this to say, in closing. There is a kind of silence that is a wall a man builds round himself because he has not been given any other way to keep alive. There is another kind of silence that is the silence of a woman in a wine-red dressing gown setting down a bowl of broth on a side table at midnight, and lighting a fire he had not asked her to light, and reading to him a stanza of Cowper he had not asked her to read, and saying, very steady, that she will not in conscience leave a man cold and hungry in his own house. The first kind of silence is a wall. The second kind of silence is a door. The door does not open by itself. The door opens, in the end, because one woman on the 3rd night of her employment lifts the latch and walks through, and does not look away. That is all I have to tell you. That is the whole of it. That is the vow I made the first night by the cold marble fireplace, without knowing I was making it, and that he made me back, 14 weeks later, on the cliff above the wide blue channel, with the gulls crying, and the wind from the south.